Support for this program is provided by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting and from viewers like you.
Hello and welcome to Louisiana Public Square. I'm Beth Courtney, president of LPB, and joining me to moderate tonight's discussion on the TOP Scholarship Program is LPB News anchor Andre Morrow. Glad you're here, Andre.
Yes, Beth, thank you so much. Good to be here, and thanks everyone for being here. Well, August, of course, marks the start of classes for nearly all Louisiana students, including those in college. For university students receiving TOPS, their tuition is covered. That's thanks to the state's taxpayers. And this year, unlike last, the legislature has fully funded the program, so 100% rather than 70% of these education costs will be covered.
Well, that generosity comes with a cost. Over the last 10 years, the state's spending on TOPS has nearly tripled. As tuition has risen, so has the award. While that relationship changed this year, the issue still remains. How can funding for the program be sustained? A legislative study group will examine this question in the fall, and tonight we've gathered together our own task force of citizens and decision makers to explore ways to keep current and future costs under control on studying TOPS. In the 2005 school year, Louisiana spent $120 million on TOPS scholarships. Last year, it spent over $265 million. Even with inflation factored in, that's nearly a 100% increase. Robert Travis Scott is president of the Public Affairs Research Council.
It becomes a real challenge, every year to come up with that much money, and it becomes a big political football too. And so it becomes the center of a controversy almost every legislative session that they're trying to craft a budget.
Lawmakers have brought together a task force to make long-term changes to the program. But to be successful, they'll first have to agree on what the goal of the program should be. LSU Area Representative Franklin Foyle sits on that task force.
Well, I think TOPS is fulfilling the goal. The problem is it's grown financially. And a year ago, we were not able to fully fund TOPS for the first time. So to keep the program financially stable for the long run, I think we need to make some changes to tighten up the program.
Data shows more students are earning good grades in high school and taking the scholarship. That has contributed to the growth of the program and is one reason the state is spending more money on it. The state paid for TOPS for 42,500 students 10 years ago. There were 50,200 in the 2015 school year. 90% of students who qualify for TOPS take it. Faith Annie, a biology major in her second year at LSU, is one of those students.
Okay, TOPS was basically the number one reason I stayed here in Louisiana, just because I would be able to get funding here and I wouldn't have to think about out-of-state tuition, out-of-state fees, and staying here in Louisiana, everything would basically be covered with my tuition.
TOPS is closely tied with the state's fiscal picture because the expense comes from a limited pool of money called the general fund. As that has diminished, so has funding for state universities, leading to tuition increases, and in turn the cost of TOPS per student has gone up. The award has jumped from $3,770 on average 10 years ago to $7,870 in 2015. Other than cost, some lawmakers think it's a problem that TOPS recipients are overwhelmingly white and disproportionately rich. One way to decrease the cost of the program would be to make requirements more stringent.
If your goal is to make sure that minorities are better served by this, there's evidence that the program is headed that way, but you may want to be careful not to raise the standards. You may hurt that trend if that's what you're going to do.
Of the roughly 15,700 incoming students in 2014 who reported their race, about 1,000 of the new recipients did not. 11,400 students were white, 2,800 were black. The number of incoming black students has increased 50% in the last 10 years, up from 1,800. The white population is held steady. Scott says it's not just colleges and lawmakers who are responsible for that statistic.
Now, That's a job that has to be done both by the high schools and if you were to go into the TOPS program and you were to increase the minimum eligibility requirements on grade point average in the ACT, you probably would work against that goal of bringing more African Americans into the programs.
Distribution of TOPS awards across income brackets is also disproportionate. About 7% of the state's households make more than $150,000 a year. But those households get 20% of the state's TOPS awards. About the same number of awards is split among the bottom 40% of the state's population, making below $35,000 per household annually. Foyle is in a camp of lawmakers who think the program should be merit-based.
I think a child should not be penalized by how much money their parents make. If they make the academic requirements, I believe they should get the benefit of TOPS. And that keeps all of our brightest kids here in Louisiana, or at least gives them incentive to stay here and go to college.
Lawmakers made 2 other adjustments to the program under budget pressure in 2016. First, the structure was changed so that in times of slim funding, every student would get a pro rata share of their award. The system was originally devised so that the best students would be funded first, leaving the lower performing students unfunded.
I think the higher performing students should be funded first, but more importantly, I think we should fund the TOPS program fully. If you tell kids, if you make these requirements, I think the state should meet its obligation and pay for the tuition.
Another change decoupled TOPS from tuition. Lawmakers will have to vote to increase funding levels from the 2016 school year. Scott says that boils down to a simple message.
Now, we have tweaked this system in a very important way in the last couple of years, and that's to say, look, students, as you're working on your requirements to earn your TOPS, there may be some years where our budget is so tight that we're not going to be able to give you the full tuition distribution, and you're on warning that that might happen.
Lawmakers did not fully fund the program Thany's freshman year. That led to tough conversations at home.
In the spring, it was greatly reduced, so that was something, okay, well, do we maybe need to take up an extra job or take up extra funding just to make sure we have a cushion and you're successful in your education?
There are also disparities among university systems. About a third of awards go to the LSU system. Over half are sent to UL schools. 5% go to community and technical colleges. Only 1.5% go to the Southern System schools. Looking back, the original legislation didn't state goals. According to the Board of Regents, the generally accepted purpose is to keep Louisiana's best and the brightest in the state for post-secondary education and hopefully to stay here afterwards and join the workforce.
So when I do graduate in 4 years, I won't be able to have to write a check to a loan company. I can write a check and give it back to this Louisiana economy. And I think that's very essential because if we want to grow and help grow Louisiana and help build, we need to put it in education.
Thany says TOPS has a direct effect on her ability to contribute to the economy.
And joining us now to explore the TOPS program is our studio audience. It includes high school students and their parents and also college TOPS recipients. There are individuals who fully support the program and others who oppose it or say its costs should be reined in. We also have members of Democrats for Education Reform who push legislative efforts to protect TOPS for low to moderate income families and also for high-achieving students. Earlier this year, the LSU Riley Center for Media and Public Affairs conducted a statewide survey on taxes and state spending, and they polled over 1,000 Louisiana residents and included questions about the TOPS scholarship. Among the results, one option to rein in costs would be to reduce the TOPS award to less than college tuition. 64% of those who responded opposed this idea, 33% favor it. 60% of those surveyed said they would support higher academic requirements for TOPS. Currently, high school students with a 2.5 grade point average and an ACT score of 20 automatically qualify. And interestingly, there have been bills to raise academic standards that have mostly failed in the Louisiana legislature. And 56% of those responding favor putting an income restriction on TOPS so that students from high income families would not qualify. 42% oppose this idea. Currently, students who meet the TOPS academic requirement can receive the scholarship no matter what their family household income. So let's right now start with your opinion of the TOPS program. What are some of the ideas for maintaining the stability of its funding stream? And so let me just start right now with Darla. Your thoughts?
Well, I just think it's important to continue with TOPS. I'd like to see it reined in some. I was kind of shocked and surprised watching how much actually was given to TOPS. And I mean, I can agree with other people too that it's very go to deserving students, but there's ways I think that you can rein it in, and I don't think that you should be punished whether your income, based on your person's income.
Now I'm going to stay here just for a second because your son is with you also tonight, and you're in high school right now.
Yes, sir.
Planning to go where to college?
Well, I'm looking at a variety of places. Thanks to TOPS, I'm able to actually look at LSU or Tulane, but of course there are very viable out-of-state options like Texas A&M or the United States Naval Academy.
So since you're directly affected by this, your parents of course, and many of you would be, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think that there definitely needs to be a way that we focus on. There's a lot of talk about the original intent of TOPS, that it keeps the best and brightest in. And so I think that there needs to be options for those who are not the best and brightest. And there are options out there on the table, like trade schools, and there's options that aren't talked about in the high school arena. And I think that needs to be a large focus.
All right, Maxwell, why don't I go to you now? You're with the LSU Student Senate.
I'm with the LSU Student Senate, but I should preface by saying that the opinions I have are not widely held on campus.
Okay.
So just to get it out there that I'm not speaking for the students.
Speaking for yourself.
Well, speaking for myself, I'd like to say that to all the citizens and the leaders of Louisiana, I'm personally grateful for the top scholarship that I've received. And I want to make that clear that, it's made college a lot easier on me and my family. But that being said, as a citizen, I have a lot of concerns. First of which being we're pulling from the general budget, which means issues like the infrastructure, issues like rural health, and issues with education are things that are being affected by pulling away from TOPS. I mean, specifically, obviously it's something we've solved quite recently, but you look at the years where we've raised tuition, but not been able to touch TOPS. And you could look at that and you could say, well, maybe the legislators are just so generous that they don't want to hurt the TOPS scholarship. But what I look at that and see is that it's a very easy political vote to say, look, these public education, these schools don't need all this money, they're wasting money. But when your voters are using the TOPS scholarship and relying upon it, you can say, well, look, we're going to protect you and we're going to protect your student. What I would advocate for is a simple change, and the first change that I would make, and to disagree a little bit with what's been said and with Representative Foyle, is that nobody's being punished on income because this scholarship is not a guarantee. This is a extra privilege, this is an extra program, and especially in a state that has the deep budget problems we have, it's being prioritized over other important things. So the first change I would make is a household income requirement. Whether it's $250,000, $300,000, there are people who know more about the issue economically and can make that decision. But this is an investment that our state's making, and if it's going to be cut anywhere, I don't want to see minority students and people from lower incomes get the short end of the stick, where not only are they being hurt at the college level, but they didn't have the same primary education benefits to get those higher scores, maybe to be considered lower performing students.
All right, thank you very much for that. Everybody has come with an opinion, with a plan, a thought, what they would do with the TOPS program. Eva, let me ask you, you're here with a fellow Democrat, and you're here in a special platform tonight. Tell us about that.
That's right. I first want to thank LPB for that clip and the data that was provided, and thank you to the Legislature and Governor Edwards for fully funding TOPS this year. That was quite a heavy lift given the budget situation that we're in. In the 2017 legislative session, DFER, or Democrats for Education Reform, DFER as we call it, supported a host of legislative proposals, including HB 390, which was offered by Representative Gary Carter. HB 390 essentially called for a shortfall plan. So if we are in a situation of a budget shortfall plan, the bill essentially said that we should prioritize full top scholarships for students who come from low to moderate households, moderate income households, and our best and brightest students. We define that as students who are scoring a 30 or higher on the ACT. So we sort of encompass two identified groups, similar to what you were talking about, Maxwell. Of course, we're open to and talking through different solutions and changes to that as we head into the 2018 legislative session. And we came up with this proposal with a large coalition of partners, including the Urban League of Louisiana, the Cowan Institute out of Tulane, several school leaders across the state, and I'm sure I'm forgetting folks that we should, and the Louisiana Budget Project.
And even you and Leslie are with the, tell me the group's name?
Democrats for Education
Democrats
Reform.
for Education
Yes,
Reform,
thank
of
you.
course. So let me ask Leslie, everything she's saying, do you agree with? Do you have anything to add to? Since you're with the same group.
I do agree with everything she says. The only thing I would add is that, as Eva mentioned, looking forward to the 2018 session, we're really interested in the recommendations and the proposals brought forth during the TOPS Commission meetings that will start September 6th. Representative Carter, Representative Foyle, and Senator Morrish, who will be here tonight, sit on that commission. So we're really interested in what they discuss. We're really interested in how we can support any proposals that expand access to post-secondary opportunities for students, no matter what family they're a part of, where they live in the state, and what they want to do in the future.
Audrey, if I could, I heard something earlier about the original intent of TOPS, and I think that'll likely come up later. But if we look back to the original legislation, this was actually part of the original legislation and intent coming out of Mr. Taylor and his formation of the TOPS program. And so I think that's an interesting point to sort of to consider as the conversation moves forward.
It's interesting, though, as you go through years
Iterations,
go by.
Absolutely.
Well,
absolutely.
not everybody believes the original intent is the same as they once did. Lynn Tucker, I know you got some thoughts on this.
I do.
And your own on this program.
Right. I'm probably old school, and maybe everybody disagrees with me, but I believe in merit. I think a scholarship should be achievement, not just because you're wherever you are in life. It should be, if you want it, work for it. And it starts when you're in high school, grammar school, families. I mean, there's really no excuse not to be able to achieve a 3.0 average. And it should be maintained throughout school. If you don't try to do your best, you won't do your best. And why should anybody have a free lunch? I mean, we don't have the money for it.
Okay, LSU students, I was a student at one point in time, and is a 3.0 easy to attain in Louisiana colleges?
It should be.
Anybody would say? Just briefly, and I wanted this, yes or no?
3.0 easy to maintain?
Yes.
I wouldn't say easy, but I wouldn't disagree that that's unfair either what she said.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I want to get everyone a chance to say something too. I'm
the
sorry.
other thing that I think just being told that you can take 12 hours and skate through, I mean, that's ridiculous. 15 hours should be a minimum.
Okay.
I mean, work for what you get.
All right, Lynn, thank you. Eddie, I love your name, by the way.
Thank you.
People probably call you Edie all the time.
They
it's spelled
do,
like
but
Eddie.
it's definitely Eddie. I totally agree with the merit system. I do believe children who are students who are coming from families that don't have the income need to be covered as well. But there's no way that I would ever want to support anything that took away a college degree or the TOPS program because their family was, quote unquote, by someone's standards, by whose standards are we looking at here, deciding that they make too much money. So this student who has worked hard all their life to maintain excellent grades, get a 4.0 or higher in high school, and then be told because your parents make too much money, you can't have TOPS, no, that's not worth it.
Okay, there are two or three we haven't spoken to yet. Sarah, I know we haven't heard from you yet.
Yes,
Your
I'm
thoughts?
also a student at LSU, but I've had a different take on it just because this past year I've been watching the legislature as a journalist. I've been working with the news service through the LSU's Manship School. So as a journalist, you have to be unbiased. You have to sit there and kind of take in all sides, and your job is just to listen and write it down and be fair. But at the same time, that year, last session, I was working weekend nights on minimum wage at Izzo's Illegal Burrito. because my parents couldn't really afford to, pay for my textbooks, because the TOPS was, TOPS that spring was 40%, I believe. It was 40%, it was funded at 40%. And it was unprecedented for, I don't know how many families across the state. And we were one of them. So it was interesting, to kind of be a student who was struggling from this, being a straight A student, being an honors college student at this. The reason I'm at LSU is because of TOPS. So it was interesting to be in that position, but also having to watch the debate go on in the chambers. And I think a lot of people don't understand, or they don't know that in times of a budget shortfall like we've been in, Louisiana can take money from two places. One is higher education, and the other is health. Yeah.
Let me hold you up just for a second here. We'll have more time to talk in just a bit, and those who haven't spoken, we'll definitely get back to you guys, because that's all the time we have for this portion of our show. But we're going to come back, and we're going to be joined by a panel of experts as we continue studying TOPS. Welcome back to Louisiana Public Square. Tonight we are discussing Louisiana's TOPS scholarship program. And joining us now is our panel of experts. We begin with Dr. James Caillet, who's Executive Director of the Patrick F. Taylor Foundation, which is responsible for the creation of the TOPS scholarship program in Louisiana and 22 other states. Dr. Caillet led the creation of TOPS programs in Wyoming and Alaska. Also with us, Blade Morris is a Republican from Jennings, serving his third term in the state Senate. He chairs the Senate Education Committee and sponsored the bill creating a TOPS task force. Richard Lipsey is currently serving his second term as chair of the Board of Regents. Regents coordinates the efforts of the state's 33 degree-granting public institutions. And Elizabeth Crisp covers Louisiana politics for the Advocate newspaper in Baton Rouge. Elizabeth has reported on the Louisiana Legislature and state politics since 2013. She's previously covered politics for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and the Jackson, Mississippi Clarion Ledger. Before we go to our audience questions, I'd like to ask each of you, is TOPS working? Is it a good thing? Your thoughts, Elizabeth?
I think, the real question here is, what is the point of TOPS? What do people want TOPS to be? We hear a lot of people say it keeps the best and the brightest in the state. I know covering the legislature, when it comes up in budget discussions, people say that, but you have to really look at, is that what the legislature wants TOPS to be? Because it's not historically necessarily what the mission has been. Do you want it to be a needs-based? I think that has been really missing from the legislature, and hopefully this task force that's been created can kind of get to the bottom of that and raise some of these issues and really try to figure out what is TOPS supposed to be for the future, because we know of anything it's likely not sustainable as it is with the budget.
Okay, Elizabeth. Mr. Lipsey?
Andre, unequivocally, yes, it has been a success. It's done just what it was supposed to do. It's helped all the students, the ones that need help, the needy, as well as bright students. It's done a good job. What we have to be careful of, we don't want to lose sight that we need to build our state economically to make it sustainable, and we can only do that through educating our children. So we have to educate everybody in the state of Louisiana, and the more opportunity that we give them, the better off we are. And TOPS has been a very important program in doing that, and I hope the state can sustain it.
Mr. Marsh?
I certainly think it's worked very well, Andre. I was there in 1996 in the House of Representatives when we passed the TOPS legislation with the help of the Taylor Foundation. So I've seen it for the last 20 years. I've heard it from my constituents. I've heard it on the street from students. I've heard it from parents. I've heard it from taxpayers. And I've heard it from educators who say the TOPS program is working, it's working well. It has problems, there's no doubt. Is it sustainable? As Elizabeth said, what is it that we want it to do? Have we been successful at that? Part of the reason for the TOPS task force, because 20 years ago, things have changed in the past 20 years. And so the task force is going to take on that mission of looking and seeing what has changed and what is our mission and where should we go from here with TOPS.
All right, Dr. Caillet.
Yes, TOPS has been a tremendous success, but you have to look at TOPS in two parts, the high school part and the college part. And the most important part is the high school part, because it prepares kids for success in college, and that was the original intent low and moderate income kids for success in college. That was the intent, and Pat Taylor at the time experimented with two programs. One he called Project New Orleans, where the Legislative Black Caucus says the kids just needed more money. So 17 businessmen came up with $1.7 million and gave $1,000 to every one of those kids who went to college. It didn't work. He also had another program, Livingston Elementary School, 7th and 8th grade kids, and he guaranteed free tuition for every kid who went to college and earned 2.5 in high school and stayed out of trouble. It didn't work either. You know why? Because of the core curriculum. The significant thing we did in high school, we changed the core curriculum. Right now, 75% of the kids are taking the core curriculum. 40% of that group go to college. So on the college side, 62% of the kids are graduating with TOPS in college, and 30% of the kids who don't take TOPS graduate. Both of those figures are wrong. You know why? Because the 62% does not include the private schools, and it doesn't include those kids who go to two-year schools.
Okay, Dr. Kaye, let me just stop
Okay,
you just for a second
okay.
there, because we have
No, it's too much.
our audience. No, not too much. Our audience wants to ask some questions, certainly. And one thing we have heard is it's talking about family income. Well, who determines how much is too much for certain families? That's a question that I'm hearing going around. And then what about the curriculum and the requirements? There are other southern states, all of those southern states that have TOPS similar programs. Their minimum GPA is 3.0, for example. Louisiana is 2.5. So these are things that people are tossing around, thinking about. Let me go first in our audience to Mary Lou Cotrera and your question tonight.
Well, I have two questions, actually. One that I just came up with as you were talking, but my position is I have 3 sons, all who attended LSU. They have 5 degrees between them. 2 of them earned undergraduate degrees with TOPS. And I don't like having the finger pointed at me and people saying, well, your children should not have gotten TOPS because you and your husband worked hard and you're successful. I resent that. It's not our fault that TOPS can't be funded. It's the fault of the legislature. Tuition has increased because the legislature has decreased its support for higher education. They've taken money from higher education. If they end the TOPS scholarships for students who do come from higher income families, where is that money going to go? Is it going to go back into education, or is it going to go in the general fund and it's goodbye to education? And they're not, and we see nothing on the horizon of funding for colleges going up.
Yes.
So that's one question. My other question is, what's the point of having a task force if the legislature does not follow the recommendations of the task force? We've seen that repeatedly in our legislature. And so my notion is that that's where we have to point our fingers.
Okay, let me go to Mr. Lipsey and let you answer, both you guys. But I think both of you guys are jumping out of your seats. Maybe you so more so. Let's start with you. Let's start with you.
I believe
Let's start with you.
Well,
that's true. But there was another side to it also.
So I respect your question, and I to some degree agree with your question. Let me take the second question first. The purpose of the task force and whether the legislature takes the recommendations of the task force. I think it's very important that we do that. I mean, there has been some 350 plus bills filed in the last 20 years that affect TOPS. Some of them are significant, some of them are tweaking the system, but only 20% of them have actually passed. And I think as the legislature continues to evolve, especially with term limits, there needs to be something in place for legislators as they come in to know what's going on in the TOPS program, how the TOPS program works, who's involved, who qualifies, how do Pell Grants fit in, all of those questions, one of which is income. So is it the legislature's fault? It is to a large degree our fault, but it's also a budget issue. And on those budget issues, I'm the chairman of education. But on that budget, I get one vote out of 144 legislators. So, there's a selling job that has to go on too. I have to convince other legislators that this TOPS task force is important, that they pay attention to what it's done. They can ignore me, or they can look at the information and say I disagree with it, or what. There's a lot of directions they can go. That's with many task forces that we've had. The other question, I'm a firm believer that this is merit-based. And whether it's a 2.5 in the core curriculum, and no matter how much money you make, I feel like, and I've always supported that from day one. When Mr. McDonald proposed it, I supported it then, I support it today, that it is based, everyone is equal, everyone has an equal chance. There are some who have less opportunity to make that, and once again, I don't know what higher income is. Is it $1 million? Is it $500,000? Is it 150,000? I don't know. I find that very hard to set that number.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are thinking that also. Dr. Kalia, you've got to.
I think the money issue needs to be resolved. TOPS is not growing. TOPS is capped. It was capped last year at the 16-17 school year, so it will not grow. 20% of the cost for TOPS, which is $60 million, comes from the tobacco fund. In 2024, another $80 million will be available for TOPS. So half of the cost for TOPS will be funded out of the tobacco fund. So the state general fund will decrease. So the funding is no longer an issue. When it comes to income, let me give you two quick answers. Number one, the students go to school, not their parents. And they need to be challenged. We had a program called Honors. We gave the top 5% of the kids who graduated with the highest GPA a scholarship. That was honors. And then we had TAP, and we put the two together and became TOPS. But if we don't have the support of all the legislators, we will not pass it. If we didn't include all the students, there would be no TOPS today, because the greatest support for TOPS comes from the conservative legislators. The Legislative Black Caucus and the Democrats are more in favor of health care than they are on education. So keep that in mind. But TOPS will not grow. It will not cost the budget any more than it costs it today. It will be less.
Mr. Lipsey.
Well, just briefly, I think the question's been answered pretty thoroughly, but just briefly, that's why I am in favor of keeping it at 2.5, the GPA, and the ACT at 20, because we do need to serve the needy, the minorities, the population that cannot afford to go to school. And if we're going to raise the level of our state, that we have to keep these young people we have to get them into college. And like Dr. Collier said, the core curriculum is very important. It's very hard. These kids have to work very, very diligently to get into college. And we don't want to draw a line and move it up and say, you're no longer qualified. We want to get as many young people into college. The more we get into college, the more will graduate, and the more that will help the economy of the state of Louisiana.
What about the 12 hours that is required? I never took 12 hours. I always took more than that.
And quite honestly, when we came out with that at the Board of Regents suggestion that we go, which is Complete College America, suggests 15 hours, and I still think that's a possibility. The other side of the coin, the people that work. But the interesting article that came out today said that young people that take 15 hours work harder. Their time is more concentrated, they're more careful with their time, they make better grades, and they tend to graduate more on time in 4 or 4.5, 5 years, as opposed to 6 or 6.5 years. So there's an argument on both sides of the coin.
Honing in on your focus.
While I personally would like to see it upped, I don't think that's in the cards. I think we leave it where it is. We leave TOPS alone. It's not broken. let's don't try to fix it.
Okay, all right, let's go back to our audience now. And Gabrielle Fontenot, you're a student and you have a question for us.
Yes, sir. My question is...
And you're a high school student.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
If TOPS is cut in the remaining years, how will the state try to keep the best and brightest students of Louisiana in the state to not only go to college, but then to give back to the state's workforce after they graduate?
Elizabeth, you want to take that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It does go back to how to kind of touch back on why have a task force. I think that there aren't a lot of these questions easily answered when TOPS debate comes up. It is kind of a little bit shallow on the floor. People just say that they want to fund it because they know that their constituents rely on it. I think the task force does bring forward an opportunity to make that case. We already saw with TOPS cut last year, there was a drop in enrollment. There was a drop in the TOPS numbers. Anecdotally, we hear a lot of there were students who did go out of state because they didn't qualify for full TOPS last year. So I think that it does merit probably one of the aspects that the task force look at is what type of impact does that have down the road on our workforce. I think that's a great point to raise.
School's just starting, of course, right now. Do we have numbers on how many TOPS scholarships are awarded right now, and how many students at LSU, how many students at other universities across the state?
Not yet.
Not yet.
We'll have those numbers in 14 days, but right now the numbers are down just a bit.
Down just a bit, okay.
Yeah, we talk about TOPS and the costs. One of the biggest problems that students are facing right now is the rising costs to go to school, the mandatory attendance fee. We got two parts. One is called tuition, and tuition is now, which is covered by TOPS, that's 60%. So that means 40% of the other is called fees, and that's not covered by TOPS. And it goes up every year. We got to stop that if we want to really help students to stay in Louisiana and to be able to take more hours and not work as much, is to stop the growth of the cost to go to school. In Wyoming, we passed the TOPS program. You know what the philosophy is in the Constitution? That higher education should be as free as possible. As free as possible. Because their philosophy is that more college graduates that Wyoming can produce, the better the economy, the better the state, and it's better for the general population.
Okay, let me go to Monique, the only person we've not gotten a question or a comment from, and definitely want to hear from you. And that's your daughter sitting next to you.
She is my daughter, yes. And actually, I just had a question based on what you were just saying from other states. So as both a parent and an educator, what I'm wondering is what have we learned from the models in other states as far as this income cap or GPA requirement or ACT requirement? What are they being able to do to sustain their programs that possibly Louisiana could learn from?
Okay, here, the first state-sponsored merit-based program in the country was in Louisiana. The second one was in Arkansas when Bill Clinton was governor. And it was just an interesting sidebar. He says, yeah, I really like this program. I'm going to pass it in Arkansas because it's going to help me to pass my tax. The people will go for it. But what the other states have is a dedicated funding source. We don't have that. Most of them have the lottery. We don't have that. You go to Georgia, it's the lottery, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Arkansas. They have a funding base. So our money comes out of a general fund. So it becomes part of the budget argument every year. The state of Wyoming had a lot of money. You know what they did? They took $500 million to start up with and put it in a trust fund. They only have 500,000 people, so they didn't need very much money. Then they grew that fund, and the intent is to grow it to $1 billion so that it would not be in the general fund and it would be permanent. Now, we did part of that with the tobacco fund. We got $1.3 billion in that fund, and that's why we get $60 million every year, but it's not enough.
I have this question. Do we not still have, I know you compare it to Texas, for example, low tuition compared to other colleges and universities across the country?
Not anymore. We did up
in the state of Texas, it's a lot
until
higher.
the legislature began cutting funds to higher education. We had a very low tuition as compared to other states. Now for the southern region, we're just about average, or in some cases higher than others. Than Mississippi State, we're higher. Than Ole Miss, we're higher. And that's flagship universities. And I've done some research on some of the smallers like McNeese, Louisiana Tech, UL Lafayette, and we've come up.
So
and our
Louisiana's
fees
come
have
up.
too.
And that's why the cost for TOPS went up since 2010. The national average increase in tuition is 9%.
Well, I've got another question, but I don't want to steal it from somebody else. So let me go to Maxwell. I know you have a question that you want to ask somebody.
I think what
I think everybody's getting questions now as they listen more too this evening.
Right. Well, when he asked the question about has TOPS been successful, all the answers included the benefits of the TOPS program, but I don't think has been adequately addressed is the cost. And I think what a misnomer is the Republicans have showed support for education, but the Democrats haven't. TOPS isn't, in my mind, necessarily equivalent with education. You've seen cuts to higher ed. You've seen cuts to the healthcare system, specifically rural health. Quite frankly, we talk about the benefits that this could do to the economy. Our roads and our infrastructure and our bridges are such high cost to our economy, it's ridiculous. And all of these things are being sacrificed for the sake of something extra. And now, again, and I stated before you guys came out here, I just want to say I'm very thankful for my TOPS scholarship, and I do want to see a way for it to be preserved. But quite frankly, to me, it's a question of priority. When we do have a state with a huge budgetary crisis, I know the constituents are in support of it because to their immediate cost, of course, they appreciate not having to pay for tuition. But in the long run, I don't think we're being honest in terms of their long-term costs and our long-term costs as a state. So I guess what my question is how do we have a more honest conversation about TOPS and what it's actually costing our state, not just what it's costing them in their tuition payments?
But Maxwell, I don't think you can equate education with the cost of a road. I think you have to look to the future. You have to have vision. And the only way we're going to do that is with an educated population. And that's just the history of Louisiana. We are 47th, 48th, 49th in every poll in education and the workforce. We need to get off of the bottom. And the way to build new roads and the way to build new bridges and the way to be a successful state is to have an educated population. And that is where Louisiana has been lacking, and we need to get every young person in college that we can get into college and get an education. Now, by college, I don't necessarily mean a four-year college. We have one of the finest LCTCS community college systems in the country right here. The opportunity to get a certificate in welding or in any type of engineering right now. Jobs are plentiful in Louisiana, high-paying jobs. So we need to get more kids with 1 year and 2 year certificates that don't have a desire to get a 4-year college education, but they need some sort of an education. They need to be able to verbalize, they need to be able to read and write, and they need to be able to hold down a job, and that's what we offer them with our 2-year colleges, our junior colleges, our community colleges, and our Louisiana Community and Technical College system, which is really well run. So I don't agree with that. I think we just need to get all these young people educated in one form or the other.
Elizabeth Crisp, you have covered legislatures, politics, which in Louisiana is often equated with universities and colleges and education in general. But you've been in St. Louis, you've been in Jackson, Mississippi, you've been in Baton Rouge. What have you found in Louisiana, perhaps, that could be another source of income or resource for TOPS, to fund TOPS? Is there such a thing?
I don't.
And why not, if not?
Yeah, I don't know that I necessarily have an answer for that source of funding, but I do find it interesting. It's very fascinating, the TOPS system as a whole, and how much it does bring about these emotions, and people feel very strongly one way or the other about it.
And you certainly see that in your reporting, right?
Yeah. In the legislature, it is something that people do tend to feel get kind of more passionate about when you start talking about cutting TOPS versus cutting higher education. The legislature was okay with raising tuition when that was also leading to TOPS being increased and education being cut. It's kind of an interesting dynamic here, and I don't know that I can really compare it to another state. Yeah. But I will say I am actually somebody who I grew up in Arkansas. my graduating high school class, I would have qualified for what they call the challenge scholarship there. My graduating class didn't get it because the legislature didn't have the budget for it. I went to school out of state.
Okay, all right. Let's go to another question now. Darla, how about you?
It seems like the TOPS is just focusing on the four-year education, and I'm a big believer, and I've taught in Texas for 14 years. We were missing the boat. And a lot of these kids already in the 9th grade have already kind of give up on their education. And I think we're having too much of an issue or emphasis on everyone getting a four-year degree. And first of all, these kids have no idea what's open to them at lower levels for their two-year degree. And I have kids at the 7th and 8th grade level. TOPS has not been discussed. When we moved here 2 years ago, TOPS was not discussed. I just think that it should be discussed earlier with kids when they start making degrees and things like that, and I don't know why it's not pushed that way.
Why isn't it discussed too? Yeah, to the panel. Why isn't it discussed more?
To talk about that, now in the secondary education today, Jumpstart is being very much used. It's a new program. It's really taken off. If you look at our numbers, and I think our numbers at four-year universities this year, when we get the count, are probably going to be down. Look and see what the community and technical colleges are. They're probably going to be up because I think of what Richard just talked about, and that's now we're focusing more on two-year educations, on not necessarily needing that four-year education, that you can get into the workforce with an associate degree or just with a certificate. So the Jumpstart program in high school, the Fast Start program with the Department of Economic Development are all programs that we're focusing on to get that education component, which is not necessarily a four-year degree. Although we still need engineers, we still need physicians, we still need attorneys to continue, but not everyone. And so this is an opportunity. The other opportunity is dual enrollment in high school. And let me back up from that too. When I talk about the Louisiana Community and Technical College, let's not forget about the technical component. We haven't left that out. The trade schools still exist in this state in the community and technical college where you can get welding, where you can get insulation, where there's a lot of certificates available for students. And those students can articulate to four-year universities if they see. You know, I'm now I want to be an electrician. I'm a hands-on guy. I want to be an electrician. But all of a sudden after 2 years I go, you know, I think I can do this. And my courses that I've taken at the LCTS will articulate to a four-year university in this state. I think we're moving down the right path.
Dr. Kaye is raising his hand.
Yeah, we have a program designed especially for the kids you're talking about. It's called TOPS Tech. And it has a core curriculum in high school, different than TOPS. Right. And it has an award system where their tuition is paid for in the two-year school.
That's
so
what
we do have that program.
Today.
If I can expand on that, that's something that's never really talked about, and it's never debated. I was a page in the state legislature, and that's never talked about. And that's one of the programs that has never been planned on cut, and I would prefer it that way, but it's a lot easier program to get into. You only have to have a 15 on the ACT to do that. You only have to have a 2.0, and kids aren't hearing about that, and that's my concern, because you're able to make a lot more money going into that program, and you're also able to go into college. There's a program where you're able to transfer from a trade school into college, and I think that's a much more viable solution, and it's a lot more easily attainable, and it's a lot more sustainable as well. And so I would just urge people to hear more about it.
And that sounds like the word needs to come out more somehow. If it isn't,
and one of the issues that we'll be talking about in the task force is the TOPS Tech program with the 15, et cetera, is only 2 years. If you decide to go to the four-year university, it does not follow you.
And perhaps the task force will also be
certainly is an issue.
Campaign also on TOPS, perhaps, if that's needed. Monique, you're raising your hand.
I am. I just wanted to say we are from a rural community, so I will say that for us, TOPS Tech, even though it may not be what she's interested in pursuing, in our community, TOPS Tech is very important. We have lots of our students that I see both at my school or just in our community that is what they would like to do in life. They are not interested in a four-year degree. They'd rather get a certificate or a two-year degree and enter the workforce quickly. So I agree that it's a vital component to building not only an education, but to building our state's workforce.
Are you finding there's information about it coming out?
Yes, in our community there is. But again, we are in a rural community where that may be more attractive than other,
You'd be surprised the number of students who will qualify for TOPS. They go into the 2-year school for nursing, allied health, and many 2-year associate degree program. I was president of Delgado College, and a lot of kids went there and they nursing, a baccalaureate in nursing and a 2-year in nursing. They're both RNs and they get the same amount of money. And they finish in 2 years versus 4 years. The only difference is one has an associate degree and the other one has a baccalaureate degree. The one who wants to continue a master's degree or some higher level has to go back to school. But if that's the goal, to be a nurse, then you can go to 2-year school.
All right, we've got just under 3 minutes left. Let me go to a question from Sarah. You had a question when you came in here.
Yes. Well, actually, I have a new question.
You have a new question. Most of you guys do.
I think a lot of people, they've been asking this for a while, but they're wondering how lawmakers can justify, funding TOPS if that means taking money away from healthcare or money away from other parts of the budget. And I wonder if y'all can explain exactly what the perspective is or what the prospect is for balancing this and making sure that people are, hospitals are funded while sending Louisiana students to college.
Basically, when they have a budget, we have 2 choices: raise taxes or cut. We've chosen over the last several years to cut. Now, we just raised taxes here a year and a half ago, and that's when you hear about the fiscal cliff. That's the 1 penny sales tax that we added. How do you justify it? I don't know that you can. It's not easy. It's probably some of the hardest things that I do is to sit in, and I'm no longer on the finance committee, but when I was in the House, I was on appropriations, to sit and hear people who, through no fault of their own, cannot help themselves. And I feel like that's a responsibility of government and taxpayers to take care of those folks. So is the program that you talk about, Max, is this, are we spending money where we shouldn't be? It's hard to say because we talk here about how important education is. And somebody has to educate and work with those citizens who can't help themselves too. And they have to be educated. It's a hard thing. It's very hard for me. It's very hard for my colleagues. It's not a game we play. We take it very seriously. And there are 144 of us. And we come from different backgrounds. We represent different constituencies. The best thing we can do is do what we're doing here tonight and sit down and try and work through it. Sometimes we're pretty successful and sometimes we're not.
There's a lot of passion all the way around, no matter what you think, huh?
Well, you just real briefly, you look at the amount of money in education and the amount of money in health care. And I think that's where maybe you've seen this, the difference in, how little, quite frankly, education is funded. But my friend here, when I was elected chair last year of the Board of Regents, I went to him and he had just been appointed chair of the Education Committee in the Senate. We looked at each other, both agreed pretty much how little we knew about the whole situation. And so it's been a learning process, but in all seriousness, we have a lot to thank for the work of Senator Moorish and his committee and Representative Landry and her committee. They work awfully hard. They're not against education. They're all for helping us. But with the oil prices and the financial situation in our state, it's not an easy task. And I'm really hoping that Senator Moorish and his committee will come up with some really meaningful help on TOPS. And I know his heart is in it, so we appreciate what you do.
Thank you, Richard.
Elizabeth Crisp, you have a quick thought?
I also just think that, this whole discussion over healthcare versus higher education or education in general, it's that way by design, because nobody wants to say I'm against healthcare or I'm against education.
Cannot, right.
It really does leave if we could solve the budget here, they've been meeting for the past 2 years and still haven't figured that out. But I think that it's that way by design, that the two most vulnerable places are places that nobody wants to cut, and so I think that's a whole bigger argument, really.
Dr. Kaye, any final brief thoughts?
Yeah, we need to have some stability with TOPS. I mean, the kids and their parents should not go through this fear every year. We get hundreds of calls. Will TOPS be funded? Will it be cut? You know, what can my kid expect? And there we get the other states, Mississippi and Alabama, recruiting our students to go there and say, Louisiana's not going to give you any money. And you don't know what's going to happen in Louisiana. You got 4 years you're gambling with, but we need some stability. Unfortunately, we don't have a 100% guaranteed revenue stream, so we have to work with what we have.
We at LPB cannot thank you enough for being here tonight as our expert panelists. Thank you so much. Our audience, just terrific. Terrific questions, a lot of energy, certainly a lot of emotion and a lot of opinions on this. So our thanks to Dr. Kaye, Senator Morris, Mr. Lipsey, and Ms. Crisp for their insight on this month's topic. And when we come back, we're going to have a few closing comments. Well, we've seen a lot of emotion, energy, certainly opinions tonight about TOPS. A lot of comments, huh?
Well, I can't wait to see what the task force has as a report.
Me too.
Because sometimes it is a false issue that Elizabeth brought up. I think it is by design, and if some things are locked in the Constitution, you can't touch them, or they're dedicated revenues.
We can open them, maybe somehow.
Perhaps. But I think for parents and students looking to this fall, I think stability is important. I think that's whatever the case may be.
No matter what, and I think we have heard that overall.
Over
If
and
anyone
all.
agrees on one thing,
Absolutely.
It is stabilizing this
Well,
program.
that's all the time we have for this edition of Louisiana Public Square. We encourage you to visit our website at lpb.org/public square. While you're there, comment on tonight's show. We would love to hear from you.
We sure would. On September 17th, LPB will begin airing the Ken Burns 10-part series, The Vietnam War. Vietnam and post-9/11 veterans have faced some of the same challenges when they returned stateside. Louisiana Public Square explored the resources and opportunities available to the state's veteran population on Louisiana Veterans Coming Home. Join us for an encore broadcast. That's Wednesday, September 27th. Thank you so much for watching and being with us tonight.
And good night, everyone.
For a copy of this program, call 1-800-973-7246 or go online to www.lpb.org.
Support for this program is provided by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting and from viewers like you.